Hello, good evening. My name is Doug Stanton. I'm an author and a founder, one of the founders of the National Writer Series, and I'm so pleased to welcome you tonight to our Zoom event. I'm standing here in the City Opera House stage. I was going to do this from home, but at the last minute I couldn't stand it anymore. I just had to come down here and see this magnificent space where we've had so many amazing conversations on this stage. I love this place. Traverse City loves this theater. I love standing backstage during the shows and listening. You tonight watching this make all of this special, either here in this room or tonight at home as you're sitting watching in our own Zoomtopia, our events. We want to thank you so much for showing up. Our Zoom world has been incredibly populated and incredibly successful, and we're going to keep doing that. But for now, I just want to say thank you, good evening, enjoy the show, and we'll see you back here in the City Opera House in Traverse City, Michigan, sometime soon, and also in the comfort of your own home. Good night.
Good evening, and welcome to the National Writers Series. I'm Jillian Manning, the Executive Director here at NWS, and I'm so pleased to introduce our guest for tonight, Karla Cornejo Villavicencio. Her book, The Undocumented Americans, is a National Book Award finalist, was longlisted for the Porchlight Business Book Award, and was chosen as a favorite book of 2020 by President Barack Obama. The Undocumented Americans offers unfiltered portraits of immigrants around the country, alongside Karla's own story of growing up undocumented, attending Harvard, and navigating lifelong questions of love, duty, family, and survival. We're also honored to welcome our guest host tonight, Myriam Gurba, to the virtual stage. A writer and an artist, Myriam is the author of the true crime memoir Mean, which was a New York Times editor choice and ranked by the Oprah magazine as one of the best LGBTQ books of all time. We look forward to spending the coming hour with you. Please join me in welcoming Karla Cornejo Villavicencio and Myriam Gurba.
So I've prepared some questions. Some of them are writerly and some of them are fun. And so I'll start with the writerly questions, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So most people probably know you for your book, The Undocumented Americans, and you've also published several essays lately. Which of these recent essays is a favorite?
None of them. I think my favorite essay that I've written was when I wrote something when I was 21, probably like the first batch of essays that I wrote when I was still writing for free, you know. And I wrote an essay about my depression. And back then when I was 21, it was still just depression. And I wrote for this recording. Do you remember this recording? It was like a lot of young women and queer people wrote for this website that was ostensibly about everything, I guess. It was just about culture, but people just wrote a lot of personal essays for there. And yeah, and I wrote this essay about depression. And what I liked is that it really gave me an opportunity to just figure out what my voice was. I think that's the best essay I've ever written. And I probably say that because I wasn't really edited a ton. And now, you know, I'm edited quite a bit more. And now it's, you know, as you can probably relate, it's, as you get older, it's more of a business. And when you're younger, it's more of you know, I'm desperate to say this thing, and I'll just say it, and I'll look for a place that'll let me say it exactly the way that I want to say it, even if I don't get paid a cent. So I think that's probably the best essay that I've written.
Yeah, those were very halcyon days, right? When we could just when we could publish and I mean, I feel like I benefit quite a bit from working with many editors, but there is like something special to that like very early raw voice when we're first developing, and nobody's going to impede it, and it gets to develop whatever way we like.
Were you edited a ton on the Joan Didion essay? I felt like that was very, that sounded like you, like fully and totally and wholeheartedly.
Oh, thank you. Like that Joan Didion essay was hardly edited at all. And so I feel like what I refer to as the integrity of my voice, like the integrity of my voice remained whole. And I'm the editor of a small magazine right now. And like something that I'm obsessed with is preserving the voices of people who write for us, because I don't want to cause like the New York Times effect, you know what I mean, where everything just sort of flattens and enters the same register. And so that's something that I work with writers very closely to preserve. So another question that I have is about your relationship with books. So some people go to books to find themselves, and they kind of use books as mirrors. And other people use books to hide and to escape. What's your relationship to books like? Have books been a place that you've gone to and kind of used as a mirror, or have they been more of a refuge where you've gone and kind of hidden from the world when you've needed to do that?
That's a really good question. It's changed over time. When I was a kid, it was more of a place where I I would, like, when I was a kid, I would take books to the playground because I didn't want to play with other kids. I would take books to parties because I didn't want to dance or be forced to interact with people. So it was, I used books in order to practice avoidant behavior. And obviously, I read books when my parents were fighting. I read books to not have to think about where I lived and to imagine that I lived in different places. But also, when I read about Ramona Quimby, I understood that they were working class, and like her dad would lose his job. And I was like, oh, there are other people who, I understood that level of it. I obviously didn't see myself represented, but I didn't look for that either. I don't read books. First of all, I don't really read books. That is probably really, not that anyone cares, but it's like probably startling from a writer. I am not neurotypical. And so I don't, I'm just constantly looking for things that don't trigger me. When I am not working, I just look. Human beings upset me in my day-to-day life. And so I avoid them if I don't have to. My circle's pretty small. The people that I let into my life are pretty gentle with me. They'll call me out, but I think I find people pretty scary, and not confusing, but they're pretty scary. And like novels, books tend to be about people doing horrible things and being horrible, and there's often nothing you get out of it. There's also like, I don't watch reality shows like The Real Housewives or things like that. That's also people being horrible for the sake of it, and I don't get anything from it. So when I do consume art, it'll be something that's beautiful and that'll make me feel something. So, basically all the art that I have been consuming lately has been like Miyazaki's films. I love, the girls in the films. I relate a lot to them. I relate a lot to, for better or worse, seeing young women who are mean and bold and sloppy and messy and stubborn and ambitious, being loved by a man and understanding what that is like. But novels I don't seek out, and the novels that I have read and that have meant something to me as an adult have been sort of coming of age stories written by adults, where there's an arc and you get somewhere. I don't enjoy stories of people just being horrible, because I know that that's true. And if I want to just read something for the beauty of the writing, I'll read poetry.
Mm-hmm. Are you interested in making visual art, or do you make visual art?
Wait, do you make visual art?
I do, yeah. But I haven't engaged in like visual art making in a while. My grandma was a painter, my abuelita was a painter. And so when she would care for me, because she would come to the United States from Mexico and like watch me during summers or just stay with us for several months, she would always make art with us. So we would sit together and she would hand me paper and we would sketch or paint together. And then she often painted my brother, sister, and I too. She would paint oil portraits of us.
Oh,
So,
I'd love to see that.
yeah, so she would paint these portraits, and they're strange. They're very like big-eyed, like bug-eyed sort of paintings. And she would tell us stories while she would paint. And I would always probe her for ghost stories because she had the most macabre ghost stories. And I think maybe that's why I look like this in the portrait.
Macabre and not macabre.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have like an extraordinary face that I'm sure people have been like, can I paint you? And you're like, no. My dad is great at drawing. This was not great, and he didn't sign leases to get apartments in New York, obviously, because this would not have been allowed in the lease. But he would paint murals in my brother's room, in my room, and in the apartments. And he was just always drawing. He did my art projects for school, like for me, not with me.
Oh my God.
Greatness is something that was expected for me. And so he would be like, why would I let you do something horrible when I could just be wonderful? And, and I would tell the teachers too. They'd be like, this is amazing. And I'd be like, yeah, my dad did it. And they thought because I was always a troll, they would think I was joking. And they'd be like, but my dad was fantastic. I'm not fantastic at drawing. I can do cartoonish things. And I didn't want to become a crafty lesbian during because that was going to go into, at some point I was going to start making oat milk. And that's when I need to stop. But I did paint portraits of some of my favorite dogs. I'm friends with a lot of dogs. And so
neighborhood dogs, or like the dogs of Instagram?
No, dogs who are my friends. So
okay.
Bitsy is my dog's my dog Frankie's best friend, and she's a French bulldog. And I painted like a portrait of her, which looked like her, but like cartoonified. And I painted just 3 dogs, but I was going to paint more dogs. Yeah, so no, you don't. I'm not good at it. I also have a problem do you have this problem? I've heard that adults who were gifted as children have this problem. I don't like doing things that I know I'm not going to be exceptional at. Like, I just won't try.
Yeah, I like from a very early age, I decided that if I was curious about a subject area or some sort of phenomenon, I would just hurl myself at it. And if I had no curiosity, like I was going to stay away. I was going to have nothing to do with it. I was not interested. There was no point. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And also, and then once I became like a teenager, I became very interested in glamour, right? And so I would study figures that I found to be very glamorous. And I no longer think this, but like as a teenager, I found Andy Warhol very glamorous. So I read everything I could about Andy Warhol, and I read that he never learned how to drive. And so I decided that I needed drivers and chauffeurs. So I didn't learn how to drive till I was in my late 20s. But the thing is, it never clicked for me that Andy Warhol lived in New York. You can do that in New York. I live in California. So I was always soliciting rides for everybody, thinking that like I was Warhol-esque when I was just this like asshole. You know what I mean? Like
You call them your chauffeurs?
I would call them my driver. Like I would call them my driver. And I was always hunting for the best looking drivers. I was like, oh, I want that one to be my driver. Or that one was like a flirtatious thing that I did.
Of course.
To get people to cart me around.
I love that. You know, I read, I remember being also a teenager and reading this piece in the New Yorker, because I saw people read the New Yorker on the L train, which I took to school. And I was like, they're reading it for a reason. And I started stealing New Yorkers from my high school library, which is a victimless crime. And, I read an article about Jackson Pollock, and they were like, he decided he was going to be an artist. And then he started trying out different forms of art to see what he was going to be the best at, because he just first decided he was going to be an artist. He was like, I'm just an artist. And then he was like, am I good at sculpture? No, I'm terrible at sculpture. Like, I guess I'm going to paint, but I'm not good at painting. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure this out. And that's what I related to that strongly. I was like, I mean, I'm good at writing, but the primary thing is that I'm an artist.
Totally.
And, you know, it's just like you and being like, I mean, of course I'm going to have a driver. You know, that's really important, I think, in sort of, in terms of, in terms of saving yourself and creating the life that you want for yourself, which is not to mean that you are going to create a life in which you have a driver, but you're going to create a life in which you can say no to people, or you can tell people fuck off, because you have always thought that you were no different from Andy Warhol.
Mm-hmm. I always think of Jackson Pollock whenever I leave my lip gloss in a pocket. and I check the laundry. Has that ever happened to you when you take out the laundry and everything is like Jackson Pollock swirls because of like whatever lip gloss you've laundered everything with? You have a really warm relationship with your fans, and it's kind of an unusual relationship. And that relationship unfolds through social media and through Instagram. And I'm curious about how you curate those relationships with fans, and who you let in, and how you guard your privacy.
Yeah, you've noticed. You know, I study celebrities. You know, I'm not a celebrity, but to some of these kids I am, and so I look at how some people do it, and I just study it as a way of boundary keeping, and also a way of engaging with people, and also a way of curating a life that seems like you're just completely vulnerable, but it's entirely intentional. I remember just being in high school, and my classmates would ask all the time when they discovered something in a book, they would be like, did the author mean to do this? And my teachers would always be like, it doesn't matter if the author meant to do this, but like, if you spotted it, it's real, you know? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I really struggle with this. I don't like Twitter. Again, I'm not neurotypical, and conflict of any kind, confrontation of any kind, just completely devastates me. And that's not everybody. So I couldn't do any career related things on Twitter. And I like Instagram because I like to, sorry, the alarm. I don't know why everyone needs an ambulance tonight, sorry. So so I guess I'll say, I know who follows me, and if they are if they're white men, comment on my pictures, anything about me being a good writer or being pretty, I'll block them.
Good.
I'm like, nobody, first of all, nobody can tell me I'm a good writer unless they're like a kid who doesn't know better. I'm like, I obviously am a good writer. This is my career. If anybody's a good writer, I block them. And occasionally I'll just say what the rules are for this community, you know? I also want the community to feel safe on my page. So that just means that like older white men are not allowed. You can be a reader, you can be a fan of mine, but you just can't really engage with other people because my fans are primarily like really young, children of immigrants, queer, trans, disabled. They're just people who are outsiders, and they really relate to a voice that is outspoken, someone who feels sensitive and who wants people to be gentle with them, and someone who's funny and someone who has suffered a lot, but still has a sense of humor. And I want it to be a special place where some of them have found each other. And when I do like Instagram lives, it's like they want to hear me talk about how I'm doing with my mental health, which I'm constantly working really hard on. They want to hear me talk about how I like Selena Gomez's new makeup products because she's someone else that they really admire. They want to hear me talk about my birds and how my feeding the crows is going. And if someone were to say something homophobic, I mean, that would devastate some people.
Yeah.
And so my privacy is important. You know, I've never posted a picture of my parents or my brother. I do write about them. You know, they're a topic, and that is, as an artist, you have a subject, but they're also people. And as people, I don't post about them. I don't talk about them as people. I write about them as a subject. And so I think people sometimes don't know the difference. I posted this article that I wrote for Harper's Bazaar about my mom, and people are like, your mom is amazing. She's an amazing mom. And I was like, she's actually not a good parent. She's an amazing character to write about. Like, I enjoy writing about her. She's a complex, amazing character. She's not a good mom.
I read the piece, and I was wondering if you had that precise response where people learned about her as a character and then were charmed by her as a character and then want to go meet her because of how you've characterized her. And like, I've had a similar experience describing my mother to people. Like, my mom is a Mexican immigrant, and my mom has this very sort of charming persona. Like, I think people, when they hear that my mother's a Mexican immigrant named Beatriz, I think they just imagine an enchilada. Do you know what I mean? And then when I describe her and I say, no, she likes to pump iron and watch Swedish crime procedurals, they're all, who is this woman? You know what I mean?
To meet her.
Exactly. So my mother is constantly getting friend requests from people who are kind of like seduced by this idea of who she is, and they forget, like, she's my mom. What?
Because they're not stereotypes. None of us are stereotypes. There's like, well, you're not a stereotype. You must be an amazing person.
Exactly. Yeah, like, this human being transcends stereotypes. Ergo, this human being is a unicorn. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. You know what I mean?
People were like, your mom is so fun. I was like, my mom is a narcissist. She's a great character to write and read about, but let's not get it twisted, you know?
Totally. Oh, totally. My grandfather is similar to my paternal grandfather. Like, he's an amazing person to write about, but he was a creep, like an absolute creep. I love to write about him. Like, he was an aspiring writer who wore huaraches and like wore a sarape and kept a sonnet tucked under the sarape, and he would pull it out and read it to women who he found attractive. And
That's not great.
the sonnet was like an address to a woman, and he would ask the woman her name first and then insert her name into the sonnet. That is who he was. Do you know what I mean? And like, it's very charming on paper.
Sure, yeah.
But to live with, he was the devil. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you a bit about your devotion to fashion and beauty culture, because I too am a devotee. So I want to know if you have a beauty routine, and I also want to know, do you find yourself beautiful, and do you talk about your own beauty? Because women so rarely do that. We're socialized to like engage in this false humility. So, so I'm curious about your beauty routine and whether or not you find yourself beautiful and describe yourself as such.
Well, you know that I describe myself as beautiful. I'm constantly telling people that I'm beautiful, and people are like, talk to us about skincare. And I was like, I won the genetic lottery in multiple ways. And, you know, first of all, like, and you know, this is the constant thing that haunts me, which is just how arbitrary things are. My brother has suffered from, or lived with, but in his case, he has suffered from, although he's indifferent to it now, acne since he was like 13 years old, and he's 22 now. And I just get like maybe a pimple during my period, like a couple months, you know, a few months out of the year. And it's like, we have the same genetics. We have the same, you know, it's just the same. And it's like, I am someone who has, you know, I've been from a size 2 to a 12. I've fluctuated because of medications, because of, you know, and I've just always felt myself to be the most beautiful woman on earth. And I love beauty as a way of, it's sort of like, I discovered something really crazy during the pandemic, which was that a lot of women were talking about how they just don't get dressed anymore and they don't wear makeup anymore. And I didn't really relate to that because I never did it to be seen. You know, I always did it just purely because I cannot write if I don't feel beautiful. And that doesn't look like this. But whatever it looks like that day, and it changes based on what I feel like my gender feels like that day, based on what I have been reading or looking at, or images or whatever. It is different every day, but I have to feel beautiful. I have to feel confident when I sat down to write. And so at some points it was because I felt like ICE was going to detain me. And when I was detained, I wanted to look like stunning in case people took like video or something. And also I felt like I would have felt not great if I had been detained in like sweatpants and no panties, you know?
Yeah.
Now it's different. Now my skincare routine, my beauty routine changes. I absolutely am working really hard to, you know, this sort of was different because I was talking to you and we're friends. And so I'm doing like something more natural, but usually for events, I'm talking to people that are strangers, and that's complete armor. So I do like a performance art thing. I do makeup that's really like stage makeup, and I turn into somebody else because I feel like it's more of like a music performance where you're just performing for people, whereas there's a conversation between friends and people are privy to it. So it's something that is, yeah, it's just another form of expression that changes every day for me.
Yeah, I also found it kind of strange, or at least I didn't relate very strongly to women who were oh my God, I'm sorry that these chimes keep going off. I didn't really relate very strongly to women talking about sweats, like their embrace of like sweatsuits and athleisure. Like, I like it. I like being comfortable sometimes, but I also like being femme as well, and femme when I want to be. And I like wearing bras. Like, I like I do. And I remember just hearing so many women talk about like freeing their breasts during the pandemic. And I was like, I really don't want to free mine. Like, I spent good money on them. When I got gay divorced, I bought myself breasts. I gotta keep them up. So let's move on to the questions in the chat, because it looks like we got some. Okay, so let's see. So somebody asks, you are a dreamer and you are now a permanent resident of the United States. How did you do it?
A lot of practice. My partner, my spouse, my same-sex lover is an American citizen. She was born in Berkeley, but raised in the swingiest swing state, swingiest town in the United States. We met in grad school, and we're shacked up.
Carl asks about your experiences in Flint. Can you talk about that part of the book?
Yeah, what was crazy to me is that growing up in New York City, I did not know how undocumented immigrants survived anywhere else in the country. Like, I sort of like understood that some undocumented immigrants worked in agriculture, and then I didn't know anything else. When I went to Flint, what was interesting is like I had always been haunted by like Edward Said and understanding that like images that were reproduced like endless times, like the Eiffel Tower, lose their meaning. And which is why it's one of the reasons why I've resisted looking at landscapes like the sunset or like the first flowers in spring, because I actually don't feel anything. I'm always like, I could Google image this, I just don't feel anything. And when I was in Flint, I was driven around and shown different neighborhoods, and I was like, this is a Michael Moore movie, and it was just a really tough moment to be like, I'm acquainted with like urban poverty, coming from New York, coming from the hood, and this is something that has been shown to people so many times, and I wonder what the images of people holding, the gallons or the jugs or whatever of that dirty water, how many images does it take for people to just become completely callous to it? And to be like, oh, I've seen that before. People are just always looking for something new. And what it took was for me to just talk to people and meet people. And it was just the startling fact that looking at images of poverty or of cities that just become carcasses because industries leave and governments leave, they can lose their effect and they can just become postcards. But it really is talking to people and maintaining a sense of empathy. And I really do worry that Americans don't, I think as a rule, have an ability for empathy. Does that mean?
No, right. So Paula asks, or rather she states that she's curious about how your interest and endeavors in art impact your writing and how that has impacted the undocumented Americans.
Well, I'm really interested in in rock and roll, and I'm really interested in songwriting. I'm working on another book right now, which is a novel. And when I worked on this book, I always have like a feeling. So I don't do outlines, although my partner, who's a professor, at some point she intervenes and she's like, this needs an outline. But I will always set out with like what is sort of like a mood board in my heart of like what I want this to feel like. And so for the Undocumented Americans, I wanted it, like I say in the introduction, to feel like a kid who had been sheltered their whole lives and who had been burdened by a lot of obligation, to like listen to that first song that made them feel like, you know what, fuck all of this. And I was like, like Smells Like Teen Spirit, or, for me, it specifically was Smells Like Teen Spirit in the scene I describe in the book, but it was also like the Strokes in high school for me. That's, when they became big. And I remember going to the public library in Midtown and finding their CD and borrowing it and being like, oh, that's out there, and I wanted the book to feel like that. And so for this novel, I was, listening to a lot of like breakup anthems. And I wanted this novel to feel like a teenage girl going to like her first concert and listening to like a breakup song, just like singing, and holding her like phone up with the flashlight on. And so that's what inspires me, is like certain affective registers that I get from music, I guess.
Sally says that she would love to hear more about your book. And by book, she's referring to the Undocumented Americans, and what you think about the situation on the border today.
Yeah, my book is a collection of essays where I travel the country to some very specific locations like Flint and Miami and Staten Island. And I talk to just random undocumented people, and like there's not much plot, but I do talk about both extraordinary moments that they've lived through, like cleaning up Ground Zero after 9/11, and just Hurricane Sandy, but also just their day-to-day lives. And I think what I'm pretty good at is taking things that have been caricatures for a long time and breathing some new life into them. And I mean, what's going on in the border is, here's what worries me. I was separated from my parents when I was a kid. It was consensual. I mean, I didn't consent. I was a year and a half old, but my parents chose that. It wasn't as traumatic as what's happening to these kids now. I'm still feeling the effects of that separation, which is crazy. It's maddening. I'm 31 now, and I was 5 when we were reunited. And I now have the resources, the support system, the knowledge, the intelligence. I'm privileged in so many ways where I'm able to identify the ways that this has damaged me and blame who I need to blame, and also work really hard on myself. And it has damaged me in profound ways, and it has damaged my mental health and my body, and in profound ways, the PTSD and other things. And that's what worries me, because the United States does not invest in mental health, and especially in communities of color. And so this is a problem where, like, I don't know policy, and the people who know policy can figure out what's happening at the detention centers. But this is a long-term problem where it's like, these kids are, if they stay in the United States, and some of them will, they're going to grow up with mental health problems, and they're going to be pretty high functioning because that's expected in immigrant communities and in Latinx communities and in communities of color. You're expected to be high functioning, to hide it and to mask it. And there's also no therapists who are trauma informed, no psychiatrists and psychologists who are on a sliding scale. These are the issues that I'm worried about and that need to be addressed, because this is going to last for generations. It's sort of like in the Flint, in my chapter for the water crisis. That also lasts for generations, because if you have lead poisoning or lead in your blood as a kid, that seems like, oh, well, he was a baby, right? Well, if you grow up, especially if you're a boy of color, Black or Latinx, you grow up with like attention deficit, you grow up with behavioral problems, you can't control your impulses, you grow up with like anger issues. These are all tied to lead. And but people, to your teachers, are not going to think it's tied to lead. Police are not going to think it's tied to lead. They're going to shoot you. They're going to send you to jail. So like that is another thing that is tied to a systemic issue that they're going to blame you personally for, and there's no way to address the mental health impact of that. So that's what I think about when I think about the border crisis, and that's what worries me.
Amita asks, do you already know what your next book will be and what its message should be following this wonderful book?
Yeah, my next book is called Dream Girl, and it's a novel about a girl loosely based on me who grows up in New York City and is a music writer, and she's a teenager, and she learns to unfuck up the relationship with her dad. A lot of kids of immigrants, a lot of immigrant kids, a lot of communities of color grow up idolizing our dads because our dads suffer a lot, and that is not great. But you also see her like navigating the underground scene in New York City, which is very formative for me. And I think it's a pretty fun book.
Jane asks, when did you become aware that you were a writer?
When I realized I was good at it. You know, I think some people can be writers, but they're not good at it. But I decided that I would give it a try. I don't know, Myriam, when did you, I mean, I've never written personal, like I've never written privately, like in a journal or things like that. I've never written for like a school publication. I was just like, I don't write for pleasure. I write because I like reading back what I've written when it's good. And then I just jumped into writing professionally when I was a teenager. My therapist always like, you should journal this. And I was like, why, if I'm not getting paid? You know, like, and like I said, I did write for free when I was a teenager, but it was always with the end goal of making it a career. My brother loves writing. Writing was always encouraged in my home. Reading was always encouraged in my home. I really don't know why my parents allowed it. It's not something I have asked them, but immigrant parents don't usually encourage this type of thing. It's reckless. Mm-hmm. It's reckless. I should ask them why they encourage this. It seems reckless to be like, I'm undocumented and I want to write. And
totally,
I should ask them why they did that. But I just, here's the thing, I didn't plan because I was undocumented. So it's like, I couldn't do anything. Like I couldn't have real career goals. So I just did what I could do at the time to make myself happy and to make myself famous. I don't know, when did you know, Myriam, that you wanted to be a writer?
I mean, it was like an idea that I played with for decades, but I never thought, I mean, usually when I introduce myself to people, not anymore, but like for most of my life, for most of my adult life, when I've introduced myself to people, I introduce myself as a teacher, because I have felt like to qualify as a writer, I need to support myself through writing. And that's not happened for me until like the last year. Like this is the first year that I've completely sustained myself through income generated by writing. But before then, I thought of myself as a person who wrote, but that's different from being a writer. And I understand that I was a writer, but I had a lot of reluctance to describe myself that way because I do attach I do think of writing as a profession. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily think of it. I mean, I do think of it as an art, but I also think of it as a profession. Okay, so Bob has a question, but like, it seems like he's kind of soliciting legal advice. So he says, I have a friend who has lived and worked in the US for 30 years. He has paid Social Security and income taxes. He has a Social Security number. He has been told he's not entitled to retirement or Social Security because he never obtained citizenship. Is there any way he can benefit from 30 years of taxes paid?
I don't know, but they should consult a lawyer, but just make sure it's not a notario or a notario. It's hard to tell sometimes. You should, there is a, look up their, see if you can find their legal license, if they're licensed to practice law. If you can't find their license to practice law, they're just gonna take your friend's money and run. I've had this happen to someone recently. So you should, immigration law is really complicated. Like, you're not gonna find this answer online. You're not gonna find this answer on Yahoo Answers, may she rest in peace. Like, you need to talk to a lawyer. And some lawyers will do a free initial consultation. So like, this is great. Just make sure you're not talking to a notario. A notario, in case you don't know, is just someone who pretends to be a lawyer and just trying to take in immigrants' money, and then they run. So just look up to make sure you can find their legal license. It is, you can just find that online in a database. Like, good luck. I know my parents have been in this country for over 30 years and they've paid taxes and they're not eligible for retirement. I'm their retirement. So I'm sorry. I don't think they're going to be like eligible for Social Security. But if you say they have a Social Security number, and maybe that's a taxpayer ID number, but good luck with the lawyer.
Brooke says, your openness and honesty is striking. Your style feels so real. Have you always written this way, or has this developed as you've grown?
I've always been this way. You know, I don't know. I'm still figuring. I'm on a journey to figure out what is my personality, what is my mental illness, and I'm talking to my psychiatrist about being diagnosed as an adult for autism, because I can't not be extremely direct, and I can't lie, among other things. I think these are great qualities that have benefited me and have been very difficult for some people. But as an undocumented immigrant, I mean, God, what a legacy. I have been in rooms with like CEOs of major corporations where they have said something disrespectful, and I have not let them get away with it. But I mean, Myriam here is also someone who is that way as well. I think that there are so many people who, so many women that I admire who, they just don't deal with bullshit. And it isn't mental illness, or it isn't because of anything. We just won't stand for it. You know, Myriam is someone who has a similar voice, and that's why I asked her to do this event. It isn't as rare as you think, you know. I don't necessarily write like I talk, but I write how I am, you know, and I'm not going to lie or to keep my head down or to mimic anything in order to camouflage myself because I'm afraid of predators. And I think that the women I admire are the same way. We're people who, if anything, we make ourselves loud and bright and noisy and really call attention to ourselves in order to deflect attention from other people who are more vulnerable. I've always been that way.
Amy says, since in the United States we need more empathy, one might think we need to build more trust and share more stories. Part of interviewing seems to be building trust to gather the stories you did with your subjects. How did you build trust?
I just talked to them. You know, one anthropologist calls it like deep hanging out. I just showed up and told them who I was, what my background was, and I just listened. And I promised them anonymity. I think that was important. I didn't use a tape recorder. Journalists can't do this. You know, I did this and I wrote the book, and I wouldn't do this again. I'm writing a book about cults for my next nonfiction book, and that's different. You know, that's going to require a different set of reporting techniques. In this case, I didn't use a recorder because I just imagined if people used a recorder with me, I was just not going to tell them shit, you know, especially if I was breaking the law. I mean, undocumented immigrants break the law in order to survive. But I also think that what will allow these stories to be told is for publishing, for the industry, is to invest in voices like mine. And I had a really fucking hard time getting this book out. Christopher Jackson, who is the publisher of my imprint, he invested in me. But my book was almost not published because people didn't like my voice. People in the industry didn't like my voice. The stories were there, the stories are fine. But my voice was not humble enough. It wasn't deferential enough. I talked negatively about the American dream. I'm not nice. I'm kind, but I'm not nice, you know? And I experiment with form in a way that Latinos are not allowed to. You know, I think people don't talk enough about the way that Latinos are not allowed to be artists. We don't have cultural capital in this country. Totally. We are allowed to look a certain way and we are allowed to perform a certain way, but we're not allowed to scare you. And I think that like people kind of talk about people of color in a way that erases Latinos. Like I think that Asian American art, Black art, obviously white writers, there's a canon that is so expansive among those like ethnic literatures. And there's nothing because there's no investment in Latinx art. You know, the only investment is in voices that sound exactly the same, telling exactly the same stories, and it's all stories of suffering, and they're all deferential, and they all end in thanking people for the opportunity to be here in the American dream. And I fought extremely fucking hard to get this book out there, and it was almost buried. And so I think that the way that people are going to become more empathetic about immigrants and Latinx people is if people in power invest in our voices, because I'm sure there are plenty of voices like mine and Myriam's, but we need an investment. We need advances that rival those of our peers. We need institutional and corporate support so we can subsist on these advances. We need marketing numbers behind our books so people can actually buy them. You know, we have ways of reporting and gaining access and writing that are interesting and good. We just need the institutional support behind us.
Mm-hmm. Jane asks, if you had a magic wand, what should we do in pre-K and K through 12 education to create a greater understanding of the value of immigrants?
I don't know. I hate kids. I think kids, I mean, do kids know what immigrants are? I mean, I don't know. What is the value of immigrants? The thing is, usually the thing is when people talk about the value of immigrants, they usually mean labor. They're usually like, think about the immigrants who put food on your table. Like, think about the immigrants who keep this town running. And it just reduces immigrants to labor. I think just remind them that immigrants are people.
Yeah.
You know, like immigrants are your neighbors, immigrants are your friends' parents, like immigrants are me, and look at my gorgeous skin. Like immigrants are just people, and just like just reduce eliminate the narrative that immigrants are people who are willing to do cheap labor that keeps this country running.
Yeah. I hate the trope that we have to somehow add capital in order to be valued. Like we should just be valued for existing. Susan asks, did you read American Dirt by Janine Cummings? If yes, what's your opinion?
I didn't read it, no. I mean, Myriam here created a movement that American Dirt is not worth having inspired. I didn't read it, no. I mean, here's the thing. My book was released a little after American Dirt was released, and I told my publicist that I was not going to talk about it. What is there to say? I've never talked about it. What is there to say? There's a lot of racism. There's a lot of appropriation. There's a lot of all that stuff. You know, white writers do it. Latinx people do shady shit too. But, you know, what upset me was the amount of manpower behind the book. Oprah supporting the
monster. It was the monstrosity.
Marketing behind the book. I was like, these books exist. They're published like every month, you know, but why this machine behind the book? And that was something. And I mean, you know what? Here's what I'll say. American Dirt introduced me to Myriam through indirect means, and I'm happy for that. And so I am grateful that the universe acts in mysterious ways, because here we are. Myriam and I are friends now. So it's sort of like having dated Dick, but then like they had a great friend, and then you're just like, you know, here's a more specific example. I dated a boy in college who was gay, and then I was gay. So we were both gay, but we dated each other. And like now we don't talk, and he's marrying a drag queen. But his friend and I are friends now. His then roommate and I are really close friends now. And if I hadn't dated him, and if he hadn't dated me, his roommate and I wouldn't be friends now. So this is what happened with American Dirt. I'm sorry, Matt. American Dirt.
I mean, what I would say, what I want to add about American Dirt is that if people are interested in learning one white woman's trashy imagined vision of immigration in Latin America, and they want to learn that through a tawdry narco thriller, then by all means, read American Dirt. That is the book for you. If you want to learn about the reality of Latin American diaspora and immigrants living in the United States, read The Undocumented Americans.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We hope you'll all continue the conversation by purchasing a copy of The Undocumented Americans from your favorite independent bookstore. Thank you again to our donors and major sponsors, Cordia, the Northwest Michigan Arts and Culture Network, event underwriter Debbie Edson, and the Traverse City Record Eagle. This event is also made possible in part by the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the National Endowment for the Arts. And thanks to you, our viewers. Your support makes all the difference, and the proceeds from these events go to our Raising Writers literacy programs to help share the love of reading and writing in our community. Thank you, and good night.